All right, welcome to a special episode of The List. Jordan joining us today is one of the most important people in the draft world, executive director of the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, but more importantly, a graduate from the best university in the world, University of Michigan.
Good to be on, guys. I love the intro. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I'm Jordan, everybody gives me a hard time because I'm such a big Michigan fan. So seeing it, I'm still celebrating a national title and no one can take that away from us.
Well, I just got asked on a radio show this morning who's going to win this weekend. And unfortunately, I had to go with the Longhorns. But yeah, we're still the reigning national champs until the end of January. So
it's funny, Jim. I always tease Brett because I always see how long he can go into an episode before he mentions the Michigan Wolverines. And and I think it was a couple weeks ago that I told him it was the longest he'd ever gone. He made it like 6 minutes into the episode before he mentioned Michigan. But I think 19 seconds is a new record for us. And I'm a UCF fan myself, so I'm still interested to see KJ Jefferson playing a big game and see how that offense looks. But we got so much speed, so I'm ready to take on Michigan myself.
You got some dudes this year now. Their secondary coach, Trovon Reed, is like a son to me, and he hit me up yesterday about a couple of his guys. So, yeah, man, I think they're gonna have a good year.
Yeah, their secondary. Me and Brett were talking about it. I said I don't think people realize how talented that UCF secondary is, and there's because of the style they play and the success they've had over the last 10 or so years. A lot of people look at the offensive side of the ball. But I think that UCF defense is going to surprise a lot of people this year, especially that secondary back there.
Yeah, no, they're building a good thing, man. They've had we had Richie Grant in the game a couple years ago. We had Aaron Robinson, so they've already cranked out some good ones, and they're excited about this year's group.
Now, go into it, Jim. I do see, looking at your history, you had been a scout for the NFL for years, won a couple Super Bowls. For those who don't know, you're with the Redskins, now Commanders, the Patriots, the Chiefs, and the Seahawks. So how did the opportunity to join the Senior Bowl come about, and what changes did you want to bring to the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, we were my family had been in Mobile since 2007. It's my wife's hometown. So really this was a family decision for me. Job came open in the summer of 2018, and I had a really good job with the Seahawks. I love that organization, love John Schneider. But this was too good of an opportunity to pass up. My son was like in 8th grade, I think at the time, 7th or 8th grade. And he was getting ready to play all his high school sports. And I knew how much of that I would miss if I was still with a team. So, I called John and I said, buddy, I think I got to go for this job. And he said, you're damn right. You have to. So it's worked out great. It's been great. And things I wanted to change. I mean, it's nothing. I mean, the game's been the best All-Star game forever. So it wasn't a whole lot to do there, but we've really hit social media hard. The thing was we wanted to be 365. We couldn't just show up in January and just expect people to pay attention to the game. So, and that's been a slow build. The first couple of years that we jumped on social media, there was a lot of, as you can imagine, the Twitterverse is filled with a lot of snarky people.
Really?
There was a lot of Nagy, nobody cares about your little game comments. And we persevered through those, and now we don't get that crap anymore. So, I think people realize how important the Senior Bowl is in the draft process. We haven't gotten that stuff for a lot of years now. So, again, it's just been more of an awareness thing than anything. And really it started off to, promote the game 365 so fans, don't forget about us. And then just as importantly, it's to recruit players. So when we've got 11 former NFL scouts on our staff this year, and we were at 21 games last week during week 1, and we got scouts on the field during pregame, and we're just trying to take fans down to the field with us, show these guys what they look like up close, body type, movement, stuff that really is important when you're evaluating players. And that's kind of been our trademark. So that's college football Saturdays are big for us. So yeah, we've changed a lot of things, right? We had our game during COVID. That forced us to kind of reschedule. Like the whole interview process used to be a free for all at all the All-Star games. These players, like when I was a scout, you just grab these guys whenever you could grab them, and that taking a step back and looking at it during the COVID year when we were in a bubble and teams couldn't do that, it was just so much better for the players. The player experience is so we've cut all that out. We've added a player recovery room for the players to use every day, which no All-Star game had done. We got these guys, mental performance coaches for there's a lot of anxiety wrapped up into the week. I think it's entertainment for the masses. This is the biggest job interview of these guys' lives. So there's a lot of anxiety. So we brought in some mental performance coaches, first group in the All-Star space to do that. We've made a lot of changes, hopefully all for the better. The players are the most important thing. So we've made this week as good as we feel like we possibly can from like a scheduling standpoint, the interview process, and just really taking care of these guys. So we've done a lot. I'll stop now and let you guys ask some more questions.
No, but Jim, and you touched a lot on the mental side of the game. And as Jim leaves us,
we got him back. There we go. There we go.
We're back from technical difficulties. But let me ask you, you were in the league for a long time. You were affiliated with teams for a long time. And now, since you took that job with the Senior Bowl, how much of you misses being affiliated with a team and a part of the everyday drive to try to win a Super Bowl? And how much of you is content with what you're doing now? Because I know a lot of people, I think, spend their whole lives, I want to work with a team. I want to work with a team. I want to be a part of that. But there's so much to do around sports that is not necessarily, like you said, being a part of the Seattle Seahawks. So how much of you kind of misses the everyday grind, and how much of you prefers kind of what you're doing now?
Oh, it's a good question. I don't miss it nearly as much as I probably thought I would, honestly. This is a game's a big challenge. I mean, there's a lot going on here. Personally, I've had to really grow in a lot of areas. So when you're scouting, I mean, you're going school to school and you're watching players and writing reports. And like you said, it's a grind. I mean, you're on the road from the end of July through Thanksgiving. So, but in this job, you wear a lot of different hats. I mean, there's a lot that I have to do in this role. I mean, everyone sees like the Twitter side and me posting videos, but like, this is a business, right? Like we're running a business here. So like, I don't get to watch nearly as much tape as I'd like to. I mean, of course I watch everyone for the game and get to a point where I, can invite the roster, but I would love to just sit in an office and watch football all day. But I mean, I go days on end without watching any tape at different points of the year. So really the only time I ever really miss it is in April. Those last draft meetings, like those last 3 weeks leading up to the draft, when really you're sitting around strategizing around the draft, not just it's final evaluations, but it's, how we're going to attack this, positionally and, trade scenarios and all that. So really that part. And then draft day itself, draft weekend itself, like, yeah, you missed that. But this job is really cool in that sense. I mean, you work for a team, you're sitting around for 7 draft picks for 3 days. I mean, we had 110 players drafted this year. So that's a lot of fun when you go on a run, in the first round with 10 first-round picks. And I think we had like a run in the second round where we had like 12 straight picks go in the second round. I mean, that's a lot of fun because you're seeing all these guys that you get close with realizing their dreams of playing in the National Football League. So it's definitely a different role. But I love it. There's some things about this job that are a lot better than working for an NFL team.
Yeah. And you mentioned I think you said you have 11 former NFL scouts on your staff this year. I was curious about the process. Like, you have the watch list out early. What time do you start putting players on the watch list? Is it beginning of their junior year or?
Yeah, we started, again, we don't put them on unless we watch them, guys. Like, we don't slap a list together. Like, those players were all watched and graded by our staff. So we start doing that in January. Even before we played the 2024 game, we were watching guys for 2025. So it's a long process. It goes all the way up to the end of August when we put that thing out. So, they're all tape-based evaluations. A lot of times we'll have multiple guys look at multiple players. So again, I think the watch list this year was probably a little bigger than we wanted it to be. Like I never want to fill kids with like a false hope that they have a chance to play in the Senior Bowl. That's not what this thing is about. I think there's a lot of BS out there that like players get wrapped up in, and we never want to contribute to that BS here. So, but because of the extra COVID year, there's just these 5th and 6th year seniors. It's a massive class. We added juniors to the list this year because juniors are eligible for the first time. And then we added specialists. So the number was 859. Again, that's probably bigger than I'd like it to be. I'd usually like it to be about half that big, but that's our starting point for this year. And, you know, the point I tried to make coming out of the watch list release is that's just the starting point for us. I mean, we had 7 guys make the Senior Bowl last year, make the game that weren't on the watch list, and all 7 of those guys got drafted. So it's like that's just the start. Like, we're going to exhaust ourselves. We got these guys watching tape every week and going to games every Saturday, and we're going to attack it. So there's going to be guys that are left off that they'll be here in Mobile in late January. So that's really the fun part. But I always want those players to know that if they were for whatever reason left off, and again, a lot of it's because they don't play last year. A lot of guys that are guys that were hurt last year that didn't have a lot on tape were hard to evaluate. So that's usually why that happens. But it's always a good starting point for us.
Jim, I want to go back. You said a little bit ago, again, going back to kind of that mental health side, and it's amazing. I think we're reaching a point kind of in this process and in the evolution where we're really focusing on the mental health side of athletes and their process and what they go through. How are there players that you find that deal with anxiety and things like that have trouble discussing it because of the stigma around it? Or have you found that as years go by, you have more and more players that are open, like, hey, I'm dealing with this. I need some help. Please provide the resources for me. And then what does that look like when an athlete, if there's an athlete listening to this that says, hey, some of these feelings resonate with me? What is that process that those mental health counselors that are under your program take to kind of help these athletes straight on?
Yeah, it's all confidential. So that's a good question. I don't know who the players are. I never receive names. I do ask for a kind of a volume of how many guys, kind of seek that counsel during the week. And we have an outside group called the Tatnik Group. Does a great job. They do a lot of consulting in all the different professional sports. They've got, these licensed therapists. They're great. They do an unbelievable job. Great resource for our guys. Our players have used them. Our coaches have used them. Our new coaching format where we've got this collection of assistant coaches that the NFL dropped on us a couple of years ago. You've got some young coaches that are, it's called a quote unquote coach up format. So like coordinators are our head coaches, position coaches are our coordinators and so forth. And so they're in new roles too. You've got some of these guys that are in, so we've had guys on the coaching staff that have used those resources as well during the week. But again, that's all confidential. I don't even know who's using it.
And Coach, the saying with the Senior Bowls has always been draft starts in Mobile. Pardon me if I mispronounce that. It's a Pennsylvania thing. It turns out I pronounce a lot of things.
No, you got it. You nailed it.
But don't ask him to say Jaguar though.
Don't ask me to say Jaguars because I say wires. But seems like every year there's a prospect that just explodes in Mobile. Has a great practice and just shoots up draft boards. Who is one player since you've taken over that you're the most proud that you and your staff ID'd before really anybody else, and you were like the least surprised that they shot up boards?
Oh man. First off, we never want to take credit for any. That's all on the players. I mean, the teams are part of our process too. So after our scouting staff puts the board together and we feel good about where we've got things. I mean, then the second part of it is our call process with the team. So, the goal is to bring all the guys they want to see. I mean, these rosters are for the 32 GMs and scouting staff. So, we take a lot of that input as well. And really the only time we've went against, and again, it's like 98% of the time we're seeing it the same. But really the only time we went against the league where they had like free agent level grades on a player that we brought him was Quinn Miners from Wisconsin Whitewater. So, we not all our guys get drafted. We had 110 guys drafted this year. It was 43% of the draft. It's our all-time number. We've been over 100 4 years in a row. Senior Bowl had never done that. No All-Star game had ever done that. But that still leaves a lot of guys that don't get picked. And the reason is it's not really the tape. It's stuff we don't know. That's what my predecessor, Phil Savage, said. The tough part is you're inviting in November and December. Like you don't have combine numbers. You don't have combine medicals. That's a big part of it, is that some of these guys have a really thick medical file and we just don't know about it. And then the interview process, like we don't know how these guys are going to do. That plays a big role in it as well. But Quinn Miners was a guy that they it's the COVID year. They canceled Division III football. So the guy didn't even play a senior year. He was down in Dallas, training with Duke Manyweather, great offensive line trainer. And Duke was shooting me videos that year of Rashawn Slater, who was our number 1 graded offensive lineman in that year's draft from the previous summer's work. And he skipped his senior. He skipped that year at Northwestern, opted out. So he and Quinn were down there training with Duke, and Duke kept sending me videos all fall. And I was like, this kid's getting better and better. And all the teams had free agent grades on Quinn. And I'm like, you know what? There's way more to this guy than teams realize. They're not seeing these videos I'm seeing. So like, we got to bring this guy. And the rest is history. He balls out down here. He goes in the 3rd round of Denver, and the coolest thing was a couple of weeks ago, he signed one of the richest offensive guard deals in the history of the league. So now he's one of the top 5 paid guards in the National Football League, coming from a tiny D3 school. So that's probably the coolest one, but all that's on Quinn. I mean, he came down there and got after it. I mean, he's the one that did all the work. So I'm happy for Quinn and his family. Like I texted him the other day, like, it's really cool that he's sitting in this place. And, 4 years ago, he was at a D3 school in Wisconsin and nobody knew who he was. And now he's one of the top paid guards in the league.
Yeah, I remember that draft. I think a lot of Dolphin fans followed your slate and was like, we want Quinn Miners in the draft. So, but
I think Dolphin fans are just at the point where they want any sort of competent, highly graded, highly sought after offensive lineman with hype signed or drafted to the football team.
While we are talking college football, Jim, one of our people joined us at Caps for Life, wanted to know what your thoughts on the new college football playoff format is.
I mean, I like it just because it's going to keep more fan bases engaged, more fans engaged in the process. So I think that's a great thing. For our game, it's kind of going to, we had a short window now. That championship's going to be played on Monday, and our players arrive that following Sunday. So that's a tight window for those guys to get to Mobile. But like the point I would make, I spoke at Michigan a couple weeks ago to those players, and a couple of the players asked me that question. I said the Joe Burrow LSU national championship year, whatever that was, 2019 or 20, they had the same thing. They played on Monday. Players arrived here on Sunday, and we had 8 guys from LSU and Clemson that, despite that tight turnaround, showed up here in Mobile and competed. So, but I think it's great. Before this expanded playoff, you start the college football season, there was literally about 5 or 6 schools that legitimately had a chance to be there, in the end. I mean, you're talking Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma. I mean, that was it, right? And now it's really opened itself up, so it should be a lot of fun.
I think Jordan's adjusting. You were talking about the draft grading committee. I forget what it's called, but one of our producers who's away for the week, he's in Ibiza. He wanted to know what your thoughts on how accurate the ratings are for when players get graded to come out, and your thoughts on people following that. Is that more just taking a risk on them? Do you support them just coming out, trying to get the money as quickly as they can? Or is there anything you would tell players if you didn't feel they were ready to enter?
What grading? I just asked, like, what grading are you talking about?
I think Brett's alluding to, if a guy, let's say, hears back that he's a 4th or a 5th round guy, or even a 7th round guy, and he feels like he should be rated higher, either deciding to go back to school or still taking that plunge into the draft.
Yeah, I got you. I mean, there's a big difference. I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page, because there's a lot of nonsense out there, and I always caution players not to pay attention to what's on social media or the internet, just because, I mean, you go back and look at some of these mock drafts. I mean, they're rough, man. Like there was an agency that did a study a couple summers ago, and there was a particular quarterback in college football this year that 2 summers ago now, he was in 9 of the 14 mock drafts that this agency studied. And now he is 2 years later. He's not even at that school anymore, which tells you like he wasn't even going to get drafted. And he was in 9 of the 14 mock first-round drafts. So, again, but if we're talking about the college advisory committee that the league, where the league or the players can put in the petition for, that's a completely different story. So, I mean, yeah, that stuff's accurate, but again, they're just grading the tape. It's like us. I mean, they're not taking into effect some of the stuff because if it's guys putting in grades, that's underclassmen. So a lot of the teams don't know those players as well, so they certainly won't know the medical stuff. They'll have a little bit of the character, but not a full picture of the character. So they're close, but that's been the great thing with NIL, guys, is guys are making a lot better football decisions now. As you know, a lot of these guys don't come from a lot, and they come from rough family circumstances. And sometimes even if they knew back in the day, 3-4 years ago, going all the way back, I mean, if people are telling them they're going to be a late round pick or a priority free agent player, sometimes that was good enough. You know what? I got to take a shot. I got to help mom keep the lights on. Like I've got a sick sibling in the hospital. I got to help pay bills. So they were even if it wasn't a top 100 pick, I mean, they were going because they felt the need to do it. Now with NIL, they don't have to do that. These schools can help take care of them. A lot of these guys are making 6 figures in college football now. So that's been a good thing. We've seen the junior numbers plummet. I mean, they topped out in 2019. I think we were up in the 140 somewhere. This past year as 59 juniors came out. So that's a good thing. These guys are making good decisions. They're not rushing into it, and they're getting better on the field. They're more NFL ready now, which I think big picture, it's good for everybody. So, yeah, I hope I'm answering your producer's question, but that's where I'm at with it.
Jim, let me ask you. You touched on NIL, and I do agree that in a lot of aspects, it's really good for some of these guys that need that help and kind of they don't have to go nefarious ways to kind of help out their families. But it does seem like we're reaching a point where there needs to be some sort of structure built around NIL. Is there anything from kind of just an outside looking in perspective that you specifically would like to see change about the NIL structure?
Yeah, there needs to be a cap. You need to cap that thing somehow. Right now, the spending is crazy. I think we need to, level the playing field. I mean, that's the great thing about the NFL is there is a cap in place. So I think that's where we're headed. I don't think this model is sustainable right now for these universities. It's not going to make economic sense for them. We've seen some of the stuff that's been put out, what Ohio State has spent this offseason, I saw a number on social media, what Florida State spent this. And you don't know if those are real numbers or not, but it's stuff that's getting floated. So, yeah, and again, more than anything, I think where we're at in the transfer portal NIL world, my head immediately goes to the coaching profession. This thing is not sustainable for these guys. There's zero quality of life right now in college coaching. I can't tell you how many conversations I have each week where guys are they're worn out. They want to get in the NFL. Unfortunately, there's only 32 NFL teams, so those jobs are limited. But like if my son's in college right now, if he wanted to go be a college coach, I would do everything in my power not to let him be a college coach. It is not a great quality of life right now. And for that reason alone, this whole thing needs to get rectified. It needs to get cleaned up. Whether that's keeping college coaches off the road and hiring full recruiting staffs for college and letting them do it the NFL model, just so these guys can have a little better quality of life, we're gonna have to do it because we're gonna eat through coaches quickly if things don't change.
But do you think that that's NIL based, or do you think that that's people realizing that we're no longer in the era, I think in any industry, of essentially the work yourself into the ground mentality? And while people are, and I coach high school sports, and I remember even 8 years ago looking around and saying, like, why are we killing ourselves for a high school sporting event? Like, why are we driving ourselves in the ground? Why are teams spending $100 million reportedly for a college sport? So is it NIL kind of making things more difficult, or are people just realizing that, hey, we need to work on our mental health just as much as we're driving ourselves into the ground to build up this football team?
Well, I think it's not just NIL, it's the portal, right? So, I mean, back in the day, you recruit a kid and you get him on campus as a high school guy. He's more times than not, he's going to 95% of the time, he's going to be there 4 or 5 years and then leave. He's not, getting up and getting out of there. I mean, we've made it too easy on the players, to get up and leave. So what does that do to the coaches? Every day you wake up, you got to go in the wideout room and make sure 14 wide receivers are happy every day. Like, that's just not sustainable. Like, we got to get to a better place than that. And then expect them to go on the road half the year and recruit. I mean, it's just, again, this is a conversation for a different podcast, but there's a lot of issues going on in the college coaching world.
Yeah, I think it was Jeff Hafley who just left Boston College to go back to the pros, and he just said, the one thing I don't get to do anymore is coach football. And
yeah. I mean, I had a really candid conversation with Jeff Hafley this spring, back in May, and I mean, I can't share it on this podcast, but yeah, some of the stories you hear are absolutely crazy right now. And it's become less about coaching, which is what most guys go into the profession for, is to help these young men become better people and football players. It's not about that anymore. It's about social media and being a slave to your phone. I mean, these guys, they can't go anywhere. I had a friend of mine take an NFL job 2 years ago, and I saw him at the combine. He was like, I've been here for 4 days, and the only time my phone is rang is when my wife called and kids called. He's like, this is insane. He's like, I've been living in this college world for all these years. Like, so I just don't think people, and again, people don't want to hear it because they bring in the money and college coaches get paid this, and I don't want to hear them bellyache. Well, you know what? Some of these assistant coaches aren't making what you think they're making, right? Like, it's not like, not everyone's making 7 figures in college football, not even anywhere near that. So yeah, it's a life choice. That's for sure. I mean, for these young guys entering in the coaching profession, I hope they know what they're getting into.
Well, on to happier topics again.
Yeah, there you go.
Back to the Senior Bowl. So looking ahead to this year, and I'll be honest, I haven't really done a deep dive into the draft yet this year. So I'm curious to get your opinion, your early thoughts, and it's only been one game. What are your early thoughts on what the strongest positions for the senior class are going into the 2025 draft?
Well, seniors and juniors, now it's like all draft eligible, but the running back class is going to be really deep. Running back's really good. The quarterback, just based off week 1, some of these quarterbacks played really well. That Miller Moss, Garrett Nussmeier tape, that was a fun game to watch quarterback play right there. The defensive line position across the board, inside all the way out to the edge, is pretty good. And the cornerback class, this is going to be a good corner class too. So I'd start there. The tight end class is pretty good, So yeah, those would be the ones off the top of my head. Probably a down year on the offensive line for all you Dolphins fans that if you're clamoring for highly regarded offensive line, it's probably going to be a little down there.
I've been clamoring for a tight end for 3 years, and we're still probably going to pass on a tight end. You mentioned cornerback. Do you think Travis Hunter is a corner or a wide receiver on the next level?
I think he's whatever he wants to be. I think he's a really cool prospect in that, he's going to give you a ton of roster flexibility at the next level. We're watching what this guy's doing right now, just from a sheer volume standpoint, is incredible. Whatever he played that week 1, 140 some snaps or whatever it is. So it's open. It's whatever the head coach is. I mean, I don't think he's going to be a full-time 2-way player in the National Football League, but could he give you roster flexibility late in the year? 1 year I was with the Patriots. You guys are probably too young to even remember this, but I want to say it was like 2003, 2004. Our starting slot receiver, Troy Brown, punt returner, is one of the best slots in the league. Well, we get decimated at corner late in the year. He flips over, plays slot corner for the first time since high school, and has 3 interceptions and leads our team in the month of December. You could get in a situation like that with a guy like Travis. And same thing, if he's your starting corner and you lose some wide receiver depth and you bring this guy in and he gets 20 snaps on offense and makes a couple critical plays. I mean, that's a super valuable guy. So. If we get him in the Senior Bowl, we'll probably rep him at both spots and let him showcase his talent.
Do you think that, and I think the number was 124 snaps. Do you think that even an elite prospect like that trying to play both ways is sustainable? Or do you think he's going to have to choose one or the other kind of as his main position and then play very limited snaps at the other?
Yeah, I mean, I just think from an NFL standpoint, it's a much more violent game than college football. And I don't care if you're in a Power 5, Power 4 conference. You go stand on the sidelines of an SEC game and then go to an NFL game the next day. It's a different level of physicality and violence. So, and then the mental demands on the position at the NFL level as well. So I don't think you could do both full time. I don't think that's sustainable. I think what he's doing is amazing at the college level for the Colorado Buffs. But I think he's going to have to, he or the team or however they come to the conclusion of what the primary position is, I think they're going to have to do that.
And do you have a lean right now as to which position that may be?
I really don't. I don't. We've got him graded highly at both spots, and I'll be curious to see what this year looks like and work through the year. But game one, it was North Dakota State. There's going to be some stiffer tests. All due respect to the Bison, who I've got the helmet behind me, but love those guys in Fargo. But he's going to face some really good tests as we go. But week one was impressive what he was able to do with Shedeur.
And North Dakota State is a good segue because we did have a lot of questions about small school prospects. I think it was 2 years ago we saw a record for FCS prospects drafted. I think we're still pretty high last year. How do you approach getting the FCS players involved in the scouting, and then when you decide to bring them into the Senior Bowl? And who are some of your favorite prospects if you've looked at FCS so far this year?
Yeah, we do small school Saturday every weekend in the summer. It's kind of become a staple for us every Saturday morning, and we profile those guys. And what's cool is to look back on the guys that we've had in those small school Saturdays over the years. So yeah, we usually start with the All-American and All-Conference teams, really for the sub-FBS guys. I mean, if you're a legit NFL player, more times than not, you're going to show up on one of those lists, right? I mean, some guy might come out of the woodworks, and that's the nice thing about having relationships in the NFL and having a lot of good friends over 20 years in the league. I mean, they'll call and give me a heads up, like, hey, there's a guy that, this JUCO kid that just showed up at, pick a school, Southern Illinois, and was just through there for practice. Here's what he looks like. They kind of get us on certain guys. So the goal is just to bring the best ones. Again, we're trying to get everybody drafted here. Draftable players at the small school level usually jump out. They're usually not too hard to identify. Now, the question is always, what are they going to look like once we get them here? Are they going to be able to step up and elevate against these, bigger program guys? And again, that goes into the wiring of the kid too, because there's a lot of anxiety and pressure and stress involved in the week. And that's for all the players. I mean, you talk to the guys from the SEC and the Big Ten, this is a big week for them, and there's a lot thrown at them. So, I feel like we've done a better job over the last 5 or 6 years of really connecting with the coaching staffs when we do want to invite a small school guy and just make sure he's wired right to kind of handle this big stage. I mean, you've got ESPN cameras and NFL Network cameras every day, and GMs and head coaches walking the field. I mean, that's about as high pressure as you can get. So we're just trying to make sure that these guys, will be able to handle that environment.
And I'll ask you this kind of on the flip side, and I don't want any name said because this isn't about hurting anybody's reputation, but is there ever a time that a guy is either very highly rated or highly regarded, and you see him in front of the lights, in front of those ESPN, NFL Network cameras, a guy that's maybe projected a first, second round, and within minutes you're like, yeah, I don't see it. Or there's something that happens that kind of makes you draw a line through that guy's name?
Again, it's the projection stuff. I mean, we see that before they come here. I mean, we watched a player this morning that's being mocked in the top 10 of a bunch of mock drafts that I think is a 3rd or 4th round player. So, but it is interesting. I mean, do we get guys down here that kind of step up, or, guys that elevate, like Braden Fisk last year from Florida State? I mean, the dude just attacked the week. And the guys that come down here with like the mindset, I'm just going to attack this thing. Deebo Samuel was that way, had a certain look in his eye from the time he got off the bus. those are the guys that have the most success. It's the guys that come down here and, feel like they should be here. An agent talked them into it, or like you can tell some guys that are like have one foot in, 1 foot out. Like they never take advantage of the platform like they probably should or could. So you see it. And some guys just have a bad first practice and then they bounce back and have a really good day too. So I tell all the guys, like, day one for most scouts is kind of a throwaway day anyway. Like if you have a good day, great. But all these scouts understand that you just got your playbook. They understand that you in some cases, if you're not a bowl eligible team, you haven't been in pads in 2 months. So really Tuesday practice is kind of really a free pass day. And then you just want to see these guys get better through the week. You want Wednesday to be better than Tuesday and Thursday to be better than Wednesday. And hopefully it peaks in the game and the guys play well on Saturday.
All right. And just to keep with the college football theme, it's the last question I have. I don't know if Jordan has any left, but your prediction for the championship game for college football this year.
I don't know who they're playing, but it's going to be the Georgia Bulldogs against somebody. I would be hard pressed to see Georgia not be in this national championship game. So, I mean, they're loaded. They've got 5 draft picks on the offensive line, a couple really high ones. Carson Beck's a really good quarterback. ETN at running back. We didn't even get to see that last week. They've got 3 tight ends they can roll at you, which is a matchup nightmare at the college level. Dylan Bell's one of the best all-purpose players in college football. And then on defense, they just reload with a bunch of dudes every year. So I would, and then just the way Kirby and the staff coaches that program and how competitive they are, I would be surprised if they're not one of the last 2 standing.
Yeah, that's how I felt too.
Now, I'm going to go out on a limb, and because you named one team and said they're just going to play somebody else, that you think Georgia's going to beat whoever that other team is. And
I do.
Is there another team in there that if they went in and beat Georgia in a national championship game that you would see, that you wouldn't be surprised by it? Or is it kind of just Georgia versus the field right now?
It's too early to say. I got to see Texas defense. They lost too many good pieces. I mean, especially with Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. I would have loved to have seen this team go into the SEC with those 2 guys. I think because it's going to be a more physical league for them. Having those 2 guys would have helped. I'd like to see more of Texas. I mean, that's a really interesting team. See Ohio State comes together. They're loaded. I mean, they are. Ohio State's a really loaded team. And then Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss, I mean, they had the most players on the watch list for the second year in a row. They had 23 players on the watch list. So usually NFL talent, that'll equate to a lot of wins at the college level. I mean, last year they didn't make the CFP, but they won a New Year's Six game and won 11 games. And that's hard to do in Oxford, Mississippi. So those would be the teams. Those would, and again, Bama's kind of a wild card. I think we just don't know what Bama's going to be compared to most years. They, without Coach Saban, they lost some players, but Coach DeBoer is a great coach. So to me, they're kind of the wild card team. So I think it'll be someone out of that group. But to me, I wouldn't bet against Georgia.
So it'll be the same group of teams that a half hour ago we said the college football playoff opening up is going to allow these other teams to compete for a national championship. But at the end of the day, it's still the same blue.
Well, Texas never made the CFP. Ole Miss never made the CFP. So I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be great to see, like, what's the group of 5 school? Is it going to be Boise with Ashton Jeanty, the running back? Like, who's going to get in? So that should be fun. And then like the on-site playoff games, that first round of playoff games. If you get a playoff game in Madison, Wisconsin, or State College or Ann Arbor, like one of these schools up north with some snow on the ground, like could be a lot of fun.
And then I know Brett said he's done. I have one more question for you. Brett has done a really good job over 40 minutes, reeling me in and keeping me well behaved over 40 minutes. But I have a somewhat selfish question for you. My stepdad's name is Jim, and it was always a debate his whole life. At what point a Jimmy or a James or something like that becomes a Jim. So have you always been Jim, or was it Jimmy and transitioned? What the only one he said my whole life that he didn't want is Jimbo. He said, as long as nobody calls me Jimbo, I'm okay. So was it ever Jimmy or were you James? Like how did we get to Jim?
I was never James. I was never James. I was named after my dad's brother was killed by a drunk driver the summer before I was born. So that's where the name came from. I'm his namesake. I was Jimmy probably till elementary school, somewhere in elementary. I don't know. But I'm still that to my mom. She's the only one that can call me that. So nobody else calls me Jimmy. But never Jimbo. I was never a Jimbo. But yeah, it's been Jim for as long as I can remember. That's a good question, though. That's a good question.
Yeah, I had to throw one non-football in there. Brett will give me his words outside, but anytime I see a Jim, anytime I see a Jimmy, anytime I see a James, I'm always very curious as to when somebody kind of transitions into their adult name.
Yeah, it happened early. And again, you got nicknames growing up, so I was Nags a lot. I mean, there's been a lot, but it hasn't been Jimmy for a long time, except for my mom. She's the only one that calls me that.
That's awesome. And then the last thing we've said Senior Bowl this whole time. I know you guys have a great partnership with Reese's. What do they bring to the table? What do they do for you? And as your guys' name sponsor, I kind of want to give them some love here.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing that. No, they've been an unbelievable title sponsor for 11 years. I mean, think about that. That's a long. You talk to people in like the marketing space, an 11-year partnership is a long time. And they've been a great partner. They've really raised the profile of this game. It's really cool having like the Hershey brand associated with our game. And now, I mean, the players refer to our game as the Reese's Bowl. So a couple years ago, this is a funny story. This happened with Malik Heath from the Green Bay Packers. Was playing in the NFLPA game, and a bunch of buddies of mine, scouting friends, texted me as soon as it happened. He was at the NFLPA game and caught a touchdown in a red zone period, and he spiked the ball, and he said, he screamed, he's like, I told you I should have been at the damn Reese Bowl. And so they refer to our game as the Reese's Bowl, so which is a cool thing, which tells you we've had longevity with our title sponsor, and they bring a lot to the table. They're a great partner. They're great support. And I know they love the partnership. I mean, you watch Senior Bowl watch list release day, and when you've got, I think the last count was 26 million views between all the different social media accounts at like the Oklahomas and Michigans and Notre Dames and Alabamas and Clemsons, when all those schools have over 1 million followers, and they're all cranking out graphics with flying Reese's peanut butter cups and Reese's Pieces. That is a big day. 26 million eyeballs in one day on social media is a lot of eyeballs. So they've enjoyed the partnership as well. It's been a lot of fun.
And Jim, we'll get you out of here now. But before that, is there anything else that you want to plug, that you want to give a shout out to, that you want the people listening to this right now to kind of check out in your world?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone that's followed us over the years. I didn't have a social media account when I took this job. I wasn't on Facebook. I wasn't on anything. And I'm coming up on 150,000 followers here. Should get that by the weekend, I would think. And so I just appreciate everyone following what we're doing and taking interest in it. And just the draft process itself. We've really tried to create that draft engine 365. And I know that's not for everybody. When I was at ESPN, like there was a faction of people up there that didn't think people could shut their brain off and like multitask enough to watch the NFL, but still pay attention to college and the draft. To me, that's crazy talk. I don't think it's that hard to watch NFL on Sundays and pay attention to college football on Saturdays as well. I don't get that. But so we appreciate all the sickos out there that follow us year round and pay attention to us and support the game. So that's it, guys. Thanks for having me on. This has been fun.
Yeah, thank you. Of course. We are definitely two of those sickos. And yep. I am very blessed that you came on and joined us today. It's been a lot of fun. Good luck with everything that you're doing. I hope that everybody that's here goes and checks out the Reese's Senior Bowl, checks out what Jim is doing because you're doing great stuff. But again, we are very, very appreciative that you took the time out of your very, very busy schedule to come on and join us. Yeah, guys, I appreciate it. Good luck to your Dolphins this year. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Have a good one. Have a good one. All right, guys.